welcome back. Today we're going to continue on with Spy School Chapter 3. This is written by Stuart Gibbs, and our publisher is Simon & Schuster's Books for Young Readers. Alright, so here we go with Chapter 3. This one is called Confrontation. Nathaniel Hale Administration Building, January 16th at 1710 hours, which is 5:10. Thinking you might be ambushed by enemy operatives at any second is a lousy frame of mind to be in for your very first school tour. Although I followed the girl past many locations that would be important to me if I survived, I couldn't focus on any of them. Meanwhile, the girl remained amazingly composed given the circumstances, even pointing things of interest out along the way, as though this was the standard orientation. "This is the dormitory for the school," she informed me, as we crept through the first floor hallways, weapons at the ready. "All 300 students live here. It was built about a century ago, so, as you've probably noticed, its enemy defenses are super lousy. Plus, the plumbing is prehistoric. The mess hall is over there. Meal times are promptly at 0700 hours, 1300 hours, and 1800 hours. Now we're headed into the south passage between the dorm and the admin building. It's usually faster to go outside, but this way is better than the weather is bad, or when there are enemy snipers on the property." There was a distant sound of gunfire outside. Even though it was taking place more than 100 yards away on the other side of a thick stone wall, I ducked reflexively. This provoked yet another sigh from the girl. "Wait," I said. In all the excitement, I'd forgotten something. "We're not alone here. I came with Alexander Hale." I'd expected her to be relieved, maybe even thrilled, but to my surprise, she seemed irritated instead. "Where is he?" "Outside, fighting those snipers. I think he saved my life earlier." "I'm sure he'll think that too," she said. We reached a fork in the passage where the windows opened to a snow-covered lawn. The girl signaled me to stay low, then peered through the glass. It had grown too dark for me to make out anything other than the silhouettes of the buildings, but she seemed to see something. "They have the entire campus perimeter covered," she frowned. "We're not getting off the property, so here's the plan. There's an emergency radio beacon on the top floor of the administration building." She nodded toward a 5-story Gothic structure that loomed immediately south of us. "It's a direct link to the agency headquarters. So, old school, the enemy probably doesn't even know it still exists. If we can make it there, we can probably call for backup." "Sounds good." I tried my best to sound calm, even though I was growing more terrified by the minute. "Stay close and do what I tell you." The girl stared down the left fork of the hall, but paused to point to the right. "Oh, the gym's down there, by the way. And the firing range, just for future references." I followed her, my head ducked below the windows, fearing imminent attack. My first gunfight wasn't going to be the way I expected it at all. Where were all the bad guys, I wondered. We were cleverly circumventing them, or were they waiting to ambush us? Where was Alexander Hale, and why hadn't the girl been happy to hear about him? And perhaps most important, "Is there a men's room nearby?" I asked. "I really have to pee." This would be my first time I experienced what is generally referred to in spy school as Hogwarts' theory of fear-based urination. The amount of danger you are in is directly proportional to your need to pee. Abraham Gothard was one of the CIA's first operatives, and thus one of the original professors at spy school. He had written the essential espionage textbook based on his experiences, and he was rumored to always wear an adult diaper, just in case trouble arose. The girl sighed once again. "Ugh, why didn't you go before the gunfight?" "I didn't know there was going to be a gunfight," I explained. "In fact, I believe I have to go because of the gunfight." "Hold it in, Buttercup. We can't afford to drop our guard." I did my best to comply. We soon reached the Hale Administration Building, which turned out to be the center of campus. Outside, all the other buildings radiated around it, like it was a bulb of a wheel. Inside, the passage we'd come down funneled into a towering entryway flanked by sweeping grand staircases. Thick oak doors on one side of the room led outside, while the other, two significantly larger doors, stood open, revealing a school library beyond. The girl started toward the closest staircase, then suddenly lashed out a hand and clenched my arm. I froze. She placed her lips a millimeter from my ear and spoke so softly I couldn't hear it. 2 enemy agents. Upstairs. The words were among the most terrifying I'd ever heard, and yet her warm breath on my ear almost made the danger seem worth it. I'll have to hold them off. Cut through the library and take the rear stairs upstairs. To where? I tried to be as quiet as her, but I couldn't. Even my whisper seemed to echo through the room. On the mezzanine level, a human shape emerged from the shadows. The principal's office, the girl hissed, shoving me forward. Run! I might not have been able to shoot a gun or fire hand to hand, or fight hand to hand, but running, I could handle. I'd had to flee from Dirk Dennett plenty of times. However, I'd never run with a full-on life-or-death adrenaline surge before. It was like having afterburners. I covered the 20 yards to the library in the blink of an eye. Gunfire raked the carpet behind me and splintered the door jamb as I lunged for safety. The library was cavernous, 4 floors wide of balconies ringing a central open space. On the main floor was a maze of shelves. Normally, I would have been thrilled by the sheer acres of books, but at the time, the library only looked like a gigantic booby trap to me. There were thousands of places for assassins to hide. In each corner, a staircase spiraled up. I zigzagged through the shelves toward one on the far side of the room and bounded upstairs while the sounds of gunfire echoed from the entryway. A bullet pinged off the banister just as I reached the 3rd floor. I hit the deck. On the 1st floor, a black-clad man clutching a machine gun darted toward my staircase. My taser wasn't going to do me a bit of good from that distance. But there was a shelf full of reference books nearby. I snatched the heaviest book I could find, Cooper's Pictorial Guide to the Soviet-era Weaponry, quickly estimated the speed of my attacker in relation to the force of gravity, and determined the exact right moment to drop a book over the railing. From below came the distant thud of the book colliding with skull, followed by the grunt of the assassin collapsing. Contrary to everything Mike Brzezinski had ever claimed, I had just found a real-world application for algebra. I dashed up to the 4th floor and found a door that looked as though it hadn't been opened in years. It led to an old dingy stairwell. One more flight up brought me into the long, wide hallway lined with imposing office doors. I dashed down it, scanning the nameplates on each. Dean of Student Affairs, Vice Dean of Risk Assessment, Director of Counter-Espionage. Finally, in the center, I found the door marked Principal. From the direction I'd come, I heard footsteps pounding up the stairs, more than one set. I threw myself against the principal's door. It was locked. I bounced off it and landed on my butt in the hall. There were a computerized keyboard to the right of the door and a tiny screen above it reading, "Enter access code." No one had said anything about access codes. I glanced back toward the dingy stairwell. The footsteps were louder, as though my enemies were almost to the door. They'd emerged within seconds. Far too little time for me to race to the safety of the far end of the hall. The principal's door was the only escape route, and I had to think of only one way to get through it. I flipped on my taser and jammed it into the keyboard. The tiny screen flittered as I shocked the system. Then the electricity overloaded and every light in the hall blew out, plunging me into darkness. That had not been my plan. There was a thump from the end of the hall as the enemy agent banged into the door, followed by what I assumed were maybe some bad words in a language I didn't know. 2 seconds later, 3 high-powered flashlight beams flicked on at the end of the hall, and at the opposite end, 3 more flicked on, which meant I was now flanked by 6 heavily armed men in total darkness. So I did the only other thing I could think of. I prepared to surrender. I raised my hands over my head and backed against the principal's wall, accidentally bumping the handle. It lowered with a click. Apparently, I had unlocked it. All 6 flashlights beams swung toward the sound. I slipped into the darkened office, slammed the door shut, and promptly ran right into the coffee table. It cut me at the knees, and I face planted onto the carpet. The light snapped on. I reflexively tucked myself into a ball and yelled, "Please don't kill me. I don't know anything. I just started here today." "Begging for mercy?" said a disappointed voice. "That's D-quality performance for sure." There were murmurs of assent. I slowly lifted my eyes from the deep pile of carpet. Instead of a horde of assassins aiming guns at me, I found myself facing a conference table. 2 middle-aged men and 1 middle-aged woman sat on the far side of it, shaking their heads as they jotted notes on legal pads. To the side stood Alexander Hale. I heard the electric hum behind me and glanced over my shoulder. There, a bank of monitors presented views of every place I'd been on campus. I winced as understanding descended. This was a test? "Lucky for you," said the man in the center of the table, the owner of the disappointed voice. He was a stocky man who seemed to think he was more roguish than he truly was. His suit was dotted with food stains, his waistline stretched the fly of his pants to the breaking point, and though his hair was thick and perfectly coiffed, it also was quite obviously a toupee. "If this had been a real incident of external aggression, we'd be mailing your remains home in a doggy bag." "But I haven't learned anything yet," I countered. "I just got here." "I'm aware of that," the man snapped. "The essay exam is standard for all students upon arrival." I looked to Alexander for help. Survival and combat skill assessment," he explained. Then he turned to the panel. "I thought the trick that he did with the reference book in the library was rather clever." "It was a lucky shot," the bad toupee man said dismally. "And using the taser on the keypad?" Alexander asked. "We'd never seen that before." "For good reason. It was moronic." Bad toupee stood and fixed me with a hard stare. He had a slight tic, a twitch in his left eye, which seemed to be exasperated by his anger. "I'm the principal of the academy. These are the vice principals, Agnes, Connor, and Dixon. You've already met Alexander Hale and, of course, Erica." I turned around. The girl was behind me. She had entered without making a sound. I gave her half a wave hello, but got nothing in return. "I think we're all in agreement that your performance today was totally deplorable," the principal continued. "You've displayed amateur-level skills, or worse, in virtually every area. Unarmed combat, elusiveness, savoir-faire." "Is there an easy portion of this test?" I asked hopefully. "I usually do well on those." The principal glared at me, his left eye twitching wildly. "You're not so hot at knowing when to keep your mouth shut either. Frankly, if you had done so well on your sticks and shown an extraordinary aptitude for cryptography, don't hear that word every day, cryptography, I'd be sending you right back to mommy and daddy. But we'll just have to see what we can make of you. You have a lot of work to do, Ripley, and as for now, a D- average." With that, he waved me away dismissively. I left the office feeling hollow inside. I'd never had a grade lower than a B in my life, and that was an 89 in handwriting back in 3rd grade. I was also slightly confused by something the principal had said. I'd never known I had extraordinary cryptographic ability. In fact, despite my gift for math, I'd always found cryptography rather difficult. Math and logic will only get you so far with so many codes, so you also need to be good at wordplay, which is why I would calculate exactly how many seconds I'd been in spy school so far, 1,319, but still be stumped by the newspaper's daily jumble on a regular basis. There had been a few cryptography games on the CIA website. I was under the impression that I'd utterly failed at them, but perhaps they'd been designed to detect some latent skills that I didn't know about. Erica stepped into the hall behind me. "It's nothing to be ashamed of, right?" I asked her. "I mean, I've had no training in anything yet. I'll bet no one does well in the test when they first get here." "I aced it," she told me, and then she left without as much as a goodbye. Thus, a mere 23 minutes after my arrival at spy school, I had learned something extremely important about it. It wasn't going to be easy. That concludes chapter 3.